Welcome back to West Texas View.
And within a family, if you've got several. Welcome back to the West Texas View. This is such an interesting topic, and I am so grateful for Dr. Bobby Jane coming to discuss this with us. He's the head of the Department of Psychiatry at the Texas Tech University Health Science Center, and he has a practicing office there as well as his academic office, and so you can access him through the number that's rolling across your screen. But before the break, we were talking about some of the symptoms and some of the inherited genes and the difference between male and female, and so continue that conversation.
So yes, I was telling that definitely it's nothing written in stone, but male kids tend to have a very different presentation compared to female kids. ADHD or ADD, doesn't matter what you call it, there are three kinds of it. The one which is called hyperactive type, where the kid's not able to sit still, is predominantly, underlined predominantly, it can happen in both boys and girls, but predominantly seen in boys. The inattentive type, where the kids do not have hyperactivity, they don't run around as much, but they space out. They have trouble focusing, they have trouble paying attention. That's predominantly seen in girls. And the third kind is a combination of two, where they have both problems. They space out, at the same time they cannot sit still. And that also is seen very commonly in boys. So, but treatment, however, remains the same. The diagnosis is very, very important. I want to say that the prevalence, that's the number of prevalence, if you take 100 kids, the chances of out of 100 kids, how many kids are likely to have ADHD is about 7. So it's not very common, but fairly common. That's the problem what we face, and that's where the reputation of ADHD has become popular or unpopular, however you want to put it, because there is a very high likelihood that every kid, if not properly evaluated, can be labeled as ADHD if they're not properly evaluated. Not every hyperactive kid is ADHD.
Right.
A kid maybe by temperament may be a hyperactive kid, kind of rambunctious, physical, wants to do things. Very bright. But if it's not affecting his learning, if he's learning and absorbing well, if he's not having problem with his organization
and his relationships
and relationship with his peers, if he's not having that, now that may be his just temperament. He's a upbeat, very hyper kid, the normal width. In history, you'll find a lot of bright people, a lot of leaders, and a lot of scientists and things like that have very hyper temperament. That's normal. That's not ADHD. Doesn't need to be treated.
That's curiosity.
That's curiosity, healthy curiosity. That doesn't. So what really happens is that, and I do agree to the fact that you brought up if ADHD has been overdiagnosed. That's absolutely the case. I agree with that. If you ask a school teacher, they'll say that a number of kids probably are underdiagnosed or overdiagnosed. So what that remains is that not every kid who is having problem at school can be hyperactive. That comes to a question that if a kid is having behavior problems, what can be the other reasons besides that if it's not ADHD? A kid can be, because kids are so dynamic, they get influenced by the environment so much that they can be responding or reacting to anything that's going on at home or at school. Common things I see that if there's a domestic problems at home, parents,
a dysfunctional family will cause a dysfunctional child.
Absolutely. You know, they say that the fruit doesn't fall very far from the tree. That's very typical over here. Parents, if they're having conflicts, if they have very inconsistent parenting issues, or one parent is saying something or the other parent is saying something different, kids getting different messages, you know, any stresses in the home, somebody coming in and out, some debts, financial problems, that can also reflect some behavior problems kids. I mean, you may think that kids do not understand what financial crisis the parents are going through, but trust me, kids understand everything.
And they understand the tension.
That's the right way to put it. They can feel the tension. They know something is going on. They may not pinpoint what's going on. And
they don't feel safe anymore.
Right. And that may also be happening in school. Inconsistencies in, say, school teachers or behavior intervention school teachers, or patients having learning problems. One of the significant problems that kids get diagnosed with ADHD is not because they have ADHD, but they have what we call learning disorder.
A dyslexia or something like
learning
that.
disorder. And what really it means is that kids with learning disorders are not stupid kids. I mean, these are not low IQ kids. It's just they learn in a very different way, what we call unconventional way. I mean, they still are able to learn things, they're still able to do things. How they process and get the information and process it is very different. We just have to find out what clicks for the child, and then it works very well. So there are different ways of doing that. There are a number of books available now, and I would recommend parents to read books. It doesn't matter what you read, particularly if you have books written by a therapist or MD about learning disorder, or even online, go to respectable institutions. Even most universities have a website connecting to childhood problems, and I would recommend get educated. The more you get educated as a parent, the more you know what's going on with the child, and the more you can present to a psychiatrist in knowing what can go on and what kind of treatment options they have.
But also, sometimes the grandparents are better at reviewing the scene than the parents, because the parents are up to their necks in alligators, and so they can't stand back and look at the forest.
Yeah.
And so if we could get a whole family educated, it would be better.
Absolutely. This is, again, it takes a whole village to raise a child.
That's right.
It definitely takes a whole village, and you got a point very right. I have a number of folks that the guardians, legal guardians, who are grandparents actually, and they're actually in an advantage because they've seen their parents go through the same problem, and they see the grandparents going to the same problem, and they get scared because they don't want the parents, their grandchildren, to go through the same as their own children went through. A number of these conditions, including learning disorder, ADHD, these are very genetic conditions. It runs in the family.
But can just one child in a family of maybe 4 children have this diagnosis?
Possibly.
Without the other children having it?
Right. I mean, it's nature. Nature can never be 100% perfect or imperfect. It's always a mix of the two. I'm not saying if there are 4 kids and one has ADHD, all the rest of the 3 will have ADHD, but I'm saying that if they're having problems there, behavior problems, the chances of having the same psychiatric condition is pretty high.
Good.
So I would recommend to screen them. I'm not saying they will have it, but the chances are pretty high.
Good. Well, and we need to talk about depression. Too, because we've got to get into that, but we're going to have to take another break. I'm sorry. I wish we had hours for this. We'll see you in just a minute. Join us.
Stay tuned. West Texas View will be right back.